Growing up and overcoming personal experiences, there is something that I learned, and that is, I think it's important to understand that some people share their insights from a privileged and sheltered place. The first one was a blanket statement, such as, I don't think anyone ever has to steal food, because there are churches willing to give out free food. However, not everyone feels welcome into a church. As a child, stealing food from a friend's home was more easily accessible than going into a church alone and not alerting people to what was going on in the home. That statement also doesn't take into account food deserts. The second statement made was, I believe in adoption, and if someone is a single parent about to have a child with no other family, then that child should be put up for adoption. It wasn't taken into account that there are many single parents raising children and doing well, and there are big adopted families filled with trauma, nor is adoption a guarantee against the foster care crisis. No matter how many relatives there are to count, quantity is not better than quality, especially in this case when the criteria should be about the parenting and the environment for the child. These are just two examples I have heard in conversation over the last couple of years, and these people felt strongly about their opinions, even when provided with another perspective. Both these statements are coming from a privileged and sheltered background where the person has never had to do something similar or experience that side of life without considering other perspectives. Therefore, they don't consider the actual reality of the outcomes of what they're saying. I have learned over time that it is easier to take a higher road and excuse their ignorance of the subject because I have come to understand that sometimes a battle with them is not worth it. It's more about how we react in that moment, because oftentimes you'll find that these people don't want to grow in their perspectives, and it's more draining than it is worth. This was hard to accept, and still is, because I'm someone who really likes to grow and be introspective. So over the years, meeting people who did not want to grow, even though they knew that their opinions and thoughts were often biased or dripped in judgment and set in beliefs against all evidence, that was a hard pill to swallow. And I believe that being open to being wrong is where growth often intersects. I have embraced being wrong because I know when I'm wrong, I know that's room for truth. However, there are people in the world who just have their perspectives and they're comfortable. So anything that threatens their perspective, they're going to fight and hold on to it with a tight grip. And they're going to search for confirmation bias so that their perspective is more grounded at the root. That is why when you have conversations with people like this, oftentimes you can hear them saying things like, well, you can't change my mind. This is how I've always been. The thing is, oftentimes you're not trying to change your mind. One could look at it like this. For those of us who like to be introspective, when someone brings something to us, oftentimes we don't think they're trying to change our mind. Instead, they're offering up another viewpoint. But for someone who's adamant about their opinions and thoughts, they're often going to take a more defensive approach. Truthfully, I can't say none of us have been there. I've been there. But that's because the association with being wrong holds such a stigma. We've been taught since grade school that being wrong or having the wrong answers is an indication of our intelligence. And so oftentimes a lot of us will hide behind our fear and we will be adamant about what we think is right, even if it's not right. Of course, that's not always the case, but in some circumstances it is. For me, over the years as I grew, I realized that the only way I was ever going to grow into the person I wanted to become was to embrace being wrong and understand that it didn't take away from my intelligence. It allowed me to understand that there's other viewpoints that need to be heard. I'm not saying that you have to accept these viewpoints as right or automatically throw yours off to the side, but it allows you to get a better picture of the concept of the world and subjects you're learning about. It's also important to remember that coming from a privileged and sheltered place doesn't necessarily mean someone with financial means, but it could be from someone who's never had to worry about a parent's love or what they're going to eat at night. We all have a certain privilege or perspective place that shelters our thoughts, and sometimes when we don't consider other people's viewpoints and are not open to them, these are often the times we can find ourselves coming from a place where we are putting our own experience front and center. And these are the times where we should be willing to step back and listen and gather enough so we can come to a conclusion that is more whole and just. I think that if more people did that through the lens of politics, religions, and beliefs, the world would be less challenging.